Hello and welcome. It's Friday, the 23rd of May. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The two Koreas exchange cross-border artillery fire after North Korea fires at a South Korean patrol boat near a West Sea border island. Neither side hit the other. President Park Geun-hye nominates former Supreme Court Judge An Dae-hee as new Prime Minister. If confirmed, An has vowed to root out misconduct, combat corrupt practices and work towards rebuilding basic principles in society. Plus, Thailand's army chief seizes control of the government. The constitution has been suspended and former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra has been ordered to present herself to armed forces in a couple of hours' time. Our top story this morning, naval vessels from the two Koreas traded artillery fire on Thursday after the North fired shells near a South Korean warship on patrol in the heavily guarded West Sea. This the latest provocation against the South following weeks of military threats. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the patrol boat was situated 14 kilometers from Yeonpyeong-do Island, below the northern limit line, the de facto maritime border between the two Koreas.
The enemy's artillery shells fell near our patrol ship, and the Navy immediately fired back towards their vessel in retaliation.
The shells landed about 200 meters away from the patrol ship, and there were fortunately no casualties. 10 shells were fired by the North and 5 shots were fired back in retaliation, but only 2 of the South Korean shells crossed the northern limit line. An official from the Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed the patrol boat was on the South Korean side of the NNL at the time of the attack. As a precaution, on Thursday, nearly 800 residents of Yeonpyeong-do Island were evacuated to a nearby shelter. This attack came one day after the North Korean army threatened to attack South Korean naval vessels in that area. And President Park Geun-hye has convened a meeting of security-related ministers this Friday morning to discuss Thursday's North Korean shelling that landed on the southern end of the western de facto maritime border. The meeting comes a day after the president accepted the resignations of her top security advisor and intelligence agency chief, following her pledge for sweeping government reforms. President Park, along with ministers in attendance, will also likely discuss how to keep close tabs on possible further North Korean provocations under the National Security Control Tower while those posts remain under interim control. In other news, government officials and private sector experts from North Korea and the United States meet this Friday to discuss ways to resume the six-party talks on ending North Korea's nuclear program. A party of North Korean officials headed by its top military chief Lee Yong-ho will meet with Stephen Bosworth, the former US Special Representative for North Korean policy, and 5 other North Korean experts in Mongolia. The meeting is one of a series of so-called 1.5-track meetings that began last September when the two groups met for the first time in Berlin. These will be the first such talks since the purge and execution of North Korea's second most powerful man, Jang Song-taek, last December. The head of the UN Food Agency's aid agency is calling on the South Korean government to do more to help malnourished children in North Korea. Arriving in Seoul after a recent 3-day visit to Pyongyang, the executive director of the World Food Programme, Ethering Cousin, said her agency's nutritional projects in North Korea that focus on providing food to infants and children are dangerously underfunded. Let's see what she had to say during her recent visit to Pyongyang.
This is an important time for us. We find ourselves in a very difficult financial position, and we're very concerned about our ability to continue operating here without additional support from the government to ensure that we can meet the needs of those that we serve.
The World Food Programme wants to provide some 2.4 million infants, children and pregnant women in the north with emergency food until at least the end of June next year. However, donations are in very short supply. Less than 1/3 of the financial support required has been pledged so far. Now, President Park Geun-hye has nominated An Dae-hee, a former Supreme Court Justice, as the country's new Prime Minister. If confirmed by Parliament, he will replace Jong Hong-won, who tendered his resignation over the government's lax response to the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. The President also accepted, as we heard, the resignations of the nation's spy chief and her top security advisor. Choi Yu-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye has tapped An Dae-hee, a former Supreme Court justice, as the new prime minister. Presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook on Thursday said An's principles and integrity in the judicial community were a key reason for his appointment.
The nominee expected to successfully carry out reforms within the public sector and the government, and to push forward with the government's campaign to root out corruption in our society.
An has a track record of investigating cases of corruption in politics on both sides of the aisle. He made a name for himself in 2003 after looking into allegations that the then-opposition Conservative Party had amassed illegal election funds, and in the same year looked into corruption charges against the aides of then-Liberal President Roh Moo-hyun. The nominee also spearheaded the ruling Saenuri Party's political reforms ahead of the 2012 presidential election. As part of President Park's recent promise of sweeping reforms, she also accepted the resignations of her top presidential security advisor Kim Jang-soo and National Intelligence Service Chief Nam Jae-jun. Earlier on Thursday, President Park called on her senior secretaries to clearly distinguish the roles of the National Security Council and the soon-to-be-established Safety Ministry. The president said the NSC should respond to anything that threatens national security, such as a war or a terror threat, while the Safety Ministry should manage public safety and natural and man-made disasters. President Park then urged her officials to make sure that the more than a dozen people still missing from the Sewol-ho ferry accident are found. She then reiterated her commitment to transforming Korea into a safer place to ensure that the more than 300 victims of the ferry tragedy did not die in vain. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News.
So the question on everyone's lips is, will An Dae-hee, the new Prime Minister nominee, help President Park fulfill her pledge of cleaning up government in the wake of the tragic ferry sinking? Our Park Ji-won got an expert's thoughts on the matter.
Experts believe the nomination of the former Supreme Court Judge An Dae-hee as the nation's next prime minister represents the Park Geun-hye administration's push for government reforms.
The nomination can be interpreted as the president's strong will towards political and governmental reform in the midst of high public demand for reforms in the area of government bureaucrats and government organization.
Yoon said the nominee's upstanding career may have been one of the factors behind his nomination.
An was a prosecutor before becoming a Supreme Court judge, and he has led an upright career with an image of integrity and reform-mindedness.
He added the nomination also signals a much-anticipated shake-up in President Park's cabinet.
Given An's nomination and the government's will for reforms, it seems highly likely that President Park will choose non-bureaucratic politicians and experts outside governmental organizations as heads of ministries.
Yoon's predictions about the upcoming cabinet reshuffle comes as public doubt grows high concerning governmental organizations and bureaucrats over their failed handling of the ferry disaster. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. Now, more Coast Guard officers are deciding to step down from their posts following last month's Sewol-ho ferry disaster. The Coast Guard says 26 officers signed up for voluntary resignation during the first 2 weeks of the registration period this month. That's double the number compared to the same period last year. Observers say the officers' decisions are probably driven out of concern about the future of the Coast Guard. The agency was at the centre of public outrage for its handling of the ferry sinking. In an address this week, President Park Geun-hye vowed to disband the agency. Staying with the awful Sewol-ho ferry disaster, and it's had a huge impact on domestic demand and consumption, something Korea's finance minister says continues to this day, although not as pronounced now. Hyun Oh-suk has promised support for businesses in the retail, transport and tourism sectors that have been hit the hardest by the tragedy. Son Jung-in reports.
Finance Minister Hyun Oh-suk, in a meeting Thursday morning with economy-related ministers, said the domestic consumption is slowly moving towards a path of recovery after a decline in demand spurred by last month's ferry accident. However, he added that consumer sentiment is still fragile and promised to work actively to help consumption and corporate investment rebound as quickly as possible. Hyun said the government will closely monitor overall economic trends and provide more support to the sectors hit hardest by the ferry accident, including retailers and transportation and tourism industries. As for overall industrial competitiveness, which is also not seen as strong, he promised to establish measures to boost electronic commerce within the next month to promote foreign investment and make inroads into overseas markets. Local private financial researchers forecast the economy to stay on a moderate recovery path in the latter half of this year. Their average estimate of this year's economic growth rate ranged between 3.9% to 4%, which is similar or slightly lower than the one previously set by the government. They said weakened consumption and a gradual drop in the $1 exchange rate may work as negative factors of this year's economy. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Now, on the world stage, it's fair to say Korea is regarded as an IT powerhouse with companies like Samsung and LG. But the OECD says the country needs to work on better channeling its research and development to create real corporate results. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The K-Tech Global R&D Forum, supervised by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, was a chance to examine the current state of Korea's industrial technology and R&D policies from a global perspective. A senior economist from the OECD, Alistair Nolan, released the agency's latest report on the matter. He says Korea has one of the highest levels of university patenting for technology, following Israel and Estonia. But Nolan said the patents are not frequently used by corporations, highlighting a lack of interaction between the business and academic fields.
Time and again, when we talked with industry representatives, the lack of awareness of IP, intellectual property, was considered a problem. They have a mindset which is conditioned, which is shaped by the incentives that they face, because they are rewarded and their universities are rewarded according to the rate of academic citations and patents, but they're not rewarded in terms of or because of their success in commercialization outcomes.
A handful of model policies from the world's leading academic institutions were presented in response. Electrical engineering professor Kim Jong-min of Oxford University says his institution seeks to own all of its intellectual property jointly with its owners so that it can be used by researchers and industry partners.
Some people say they may lose opportunity and money in the short period of time, but in the longer term, they will get more returns as a royalty.
Kim suggested that small and medium-sized companies have a great chance to succeed in the energy sector when collaborating with universities, since it depends on the basic sciences and the convergence of many different types of R&D. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Time for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre there. Eunice, the sun is up now in Thailand, and citizens there are now under military rule. And the Thai army, in fact, has ordered members of the now former government to turn themselves in.
That's right, Mark. Former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra is among that list of officials summoned to show up at the main army office at noon Korea time, 10 a.m. in Bangkok. Members of Thailand's main coalition party, the PTP, have also been called, but for what reason, it is yet unclear. This, of course, one day after Thailand's military launched a mostly quiet coup that unseated the country's caretaker government, suspending the constitution and putting Army Chief General Prayut Chan-o-cha at the helm for now. Now, early reports say Thursday's multi-party discussions to negotiate an end to the political impasse ended with some of the leaders, including that of the anti-government red shirts, being taken into custody. On the streets, it was mostly calm. A nationwide curfew was installed between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. Soldiers dispersed demonstrators at two main protest sites, and government programming filled the airwaves as international news channels were blocked. World leaders also condemned the coup as Thailand welcomes, or rather sees, its 12th successful coup since the end of its absolute monarchy in 1932. Dozens of people have been killed in a market attack in China's restive far western region. Xinhua News Agency reports at least 31 are dead and nearly 100 injured after two vehicles without license plates rammed through barriers and into shoppers in an Urumqi market at 7:50 Thursday morning. Now, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region said explosives were then detonated, exacerbating the damage. Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged to severely punish the terrorists responsible for the attacks that killed the most number of people in Xinjiang in recent years. Chinese authorities are blaming radical Muslim separatists from the Uyghur minority, the same group that was said to be behind the bomb attack at a train station late last month. As Serbians observed 3 days of national mourning this week, police said 27 people were killed and more than 580 missing following the region's worst rainfall in memory. Serbia's prime minister said damages could reach upwards of $2 billion. Meanwhile, in neighboring Bosnia, the deadly flooding affected 40% of the country, wrecking the main agriculture industry and wiping out infrastructure. 22 people were reported killed there. Both countries have begun talks with the European Union for reconstruction aid in the coming days. And over in the U.S., New York City police, together with federal authorities, have arrested at least 70 people in one of the country's largest online child pornography busts ever. The arrests conclude a 5-week-long investigation that utilized a website that allowed users to share illicit images of children under surveillance. Among those arrested were a police officer, a rabbi, a Boy Scout leader, and a nurse. Most of the men were charged with exploiting and photographing children, while one woman was also detained for allegedly using Skype to place her child in compromising positions.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with PS Eindhoven taking on the Suwon Samsung Blue Wings to kick off their Korea tour at the Suwon World Cup Stadium. And with Park Ji-sung playing for PSV Eindhoven, fans who attended the match were able to cheer on for Park Ji-sung once again. And while it was a scoreless match throughout most of the match, as soon as Park Ji-sung is subbed out from the match, Kim Dae-kyung scores in the 71st minute of the match as Suwon wins this match 1-0. And now moving over to the 2014 Women's Asian Cup, where the South Korean national football team faced off against Australia in the semifinals. And despite Park Geun-hye finding the back of the net once again after scoring a penalty early in the second half, Korea loses 2-1 and fails to advance to the finals. And now with that, moving over to the KBL, where the voting took place on Thursday to choose the next commissioner of the Domestic Basketball League. And after 2 stages of the voting taking place, the former KBL commissioner of the league, Kim Young-gi, who had just the position for less than 2 years, received 8 out of 10 votes as he was elected as the 8th commissioner of the league.
The newly elected commissioner stated that he will make the league a better place and a more exciting league for the fans, as he hopes to also raise the competition in the league as well. And now shifting over to the majors, where LA Dodgers lefty Lee Hyun-jin returned from his injury and faced off against the New York Mets on Wednesday night, U.S. time. And after being on the DL for quite a bit after being sidelined with an inflamed shoulder, Lee Hyun-jin pitched 6 innings, giving up just 2 runs on 9 hits, while striking out 9 New York Mets batters. He did make one mistake of giving up a 2-run shot to Eric Campbell in the 6th inning, but showed great speed in his fastball as he earned his 4th win of the season. And now finishing things off with some Thursday night's KBO action, the Hanwha Eagles continued to fire away, beating the Nexen Heroes 16-3 with the Samsung Lions rallying back once again to beat the Lotte Giants 6-5, and the SK Wyverns take the series against the NC Dinos with a 3-2 victory. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the LG Twins take on the Kia Tigers. And of course, going into the match here, we go over to the 2nd inning. Chae-kyung-chul checked that RBI single to right. LG takes the lead 1-0. Next batter, Kim Yong-hee through the right side, and it's now 2-0. We're not done yet here. This time, Oh Ji-hwan singles to center field, and the score is now 3-0 after 2 innings. LG continues to light it up, and they take an 11-1 lead in the 7th, but Park Geun-hye sends this one to deep left field, back, gone, a solo shot, and it's 11-2. 2 batters later, here's Park Geun-hye this time, and there it goes, another solo shot makes it 11-3, as he would add another one in the 9th inning. But the LG Twins hang on to win this game 12-6, your final score. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning, I'm Lee Ji-hyun with the latest weather updates. Well, it's going to be hotter here in Seoul today, scorching to 29 degrees Celsius, and the sun and warmth in the air will hold temperatures in the upper 20s to low 30s across the nation. And due to those plenty of sunshine that we're going to have, the UV level will be relatively higher than usual, so please have a sun protection ready by having your glasses and hat ready, and also don't forget to apply a good amount of sunblock before heading out today. And it seems like sky should remain bright tomorrow with high temperatures, but Sunday we are expecting showers in the afternoon, and this might linger till Monday morning, and that could relieve some heat and cool things down a bit. Well, sunny skies is also expected over in Jindo. Winds and waves should remain calm, and the currents in the water will start to get slower since the neap tide period starts today. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The high in Seoul will rise to 29, while Daegu and Gwangju will peak at 30, and Busan should climb to 23 later on. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Daejeon will reach 25 and 29 later in the day. Dokdo should see a high of 20, while Mount Keungang tops out at 19. Well, that's all for now, but I'll be back with more updates afternoon, and it's time to take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world.
Okay, well, that does it for now. We'll be back with another newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.